Emily never imagined that the sacrifice of her own body would save a millionaire's child, and that this choice would provoke a storm of hatred within the powerful family. Now, Richard Miller faces a cruel dilemma: follow his heart or the social control of his wife. Tell us in the comments which city you're watching from and rate this story from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very valuable. Leave a like and subscribe to the channel to receive more exciting stories like this one. The morning light was timid as it entered the small apartment where Emily was starting her day. The clock, with its glass slightly fogged by humidity, marked exactly 8 o'clock. The strong smell of cheap coffee mixed with the persistent odor of used oil, which the damp cloth couldn't completely eliminate from the kitchen. Emily adjusted the colorful scarf that had held her hair for days, trying to disguise the fatigue that marked her brown eyes. Her blue uniform from the upscale restaurant where she worked as a kitchen assistant, besides being wrinkled, carried the marks of effort, small grease stains and flour crumbs. She took a deep breath, feeling the humid warmth of the New York morning fill her lungs. She knew the shift would be long, yet another daily battle against the exhausting routine and the differences that separated her life from the refined clients who would soon arrive at the Grand Bistro. The restaurant, located in the heart of the Upper East Side, was the stage for expensive dinners, rehearsed smiles, and a world to which Emily felt she did not belong, and perhaps never would. Carrying a still warm tray filled with perfectly golden crab cakes, Emily left the kitchen, where the buzz of cooks and waiters created a contrast with the imposing silence of the dining room prepared to welcome the guests. The light wood floor reflected the glow from the chandeliers and large windows, while in the background a subtle jazz sound filled the air, contributing to the sophisticated atmosphere. As she took her first steps toward the designated table, a small slip nearly turned the scene into disaster. Her foot brushed against the leg of a poorly positioned chair, and the tray wobbled, shaking the crab cakes that disobediently began to slide, about to fall onto the polished floor. Her heart leaped to her throat, and her hands tried to compensate for the loss with an urgent and trembling movement. "Calm down. I think I can help." A firm and unexpected voice interrupted the moment of panic. Richard Miller was there, in his austere and elegant posture, with his dark suit perfectly aligned to every inch of his body. His deep and attentive gaze fixed on the almost lost tray, and for a moment a slight shadow of kindness appeared on that powerful man. With precise movements, he picked up the crab cakes that were about to touch the ground and placed them on a clean plate beside him, avoiding humiliation in front of everyone. Emily felt her cheeks burning, not only from the scare, but from being the center of attention in a place where she preferred to be invisible. Her colleagues in the kitchen quickly noticed the scene. Low laughter and whispers began to spread in the confined air. "Look at Emily trying to impress in the rich people's dining room," mocked Joe, the older cook, while shaking his head with an ironic smile. "If it were me, I would have run away by now," added another female voice already escaping between the stoves. The embarrassment made her bite her lips, but Richard's voice brought unexpected comfort, breaking through the whispers. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice calm, almost an invitation to forget the crab cake mishap. "Emily," she replied, her voice wavering but firm. He smiled, a small gesture unusual on that face marked by seriousness. "Emily, I hope this is just the beginning of many days at Miller's Gourmet," he said, with a smile that sparked a shy light in her eyes. With the tension dissipated, the clinking of cutlery and the hurried steps of the waiters filled the dining room again. Emily returned to the kitchen, trying to reorganize her thoughts and hide the warmth still rising in her face. At the restaurant's exit, the weight of the uniform felt even heavier after the unexpected encounter with the millionaire. On the bustling sidewalk, as cars honked and people hurried to their commitments, she searched her phone for information about Richard Miller, the biography of the millionaire chef, his culinary empire, and the press surrounding him left no doubt. That man was from a world completely different from hers. The tall buildings of the Upper East Side reflected the sun in glass and steel as Emily made her way home, each step reminding her of the distance between her simple and sophisticated reality. The smell of the city, a mix of pollution, coffee, and fruits sold at street stalls, invaded her tired senses. As she walked through the pothole-ridden streets of the outskirts, she felt a blend of fear and hope subtly intertwined within her chest. Tomorrow is a new day, she murmured to herself, gripping the strap of her worn bag. Maybe, just maybe, this story has begun to change now. Unbeknownst to her, Emily had just entered the orbit of a life that would change her destiny, and the destiny of the man who, until then, seemed unattainable. A story of unlikely encounters, of abysmal differences, but also of courage and humanity. There, in that first stumble, the spark was born that would ignite paths and hearts. The social game between wealth and humility was beginning to be written, as Emily took her first step into a universe she had only known through the mirrored glass of the expensive restaurant where she worked. A universe that, no matter how distant it seemed, was beginning to intertwine with hers, in a way neither of them could imagine. Richard Miller closed the office door with a soft click, shutting out the intense noise of the bustling city outside. The cold glow of the screens and the white lighting contrasted with the whirlwind that stirred his thoughts. That image of Emily wouldn't leave his mind. The woman with calloused hands, the colourful scarf tied in her hair, and the tired smile that still seemed to carry a silent strength. He sat at the polished mahogany table, his fingers nervously drumming, trying to understand what that meeting had awakened, something against all the rules of his life. In the environment that had shaped his world, the glass and steel castle of Miller's Gourmet, the demands were clear and relentless. The pressure from Mariana, his wife, was especially suffocating. She, perfect and strict, represented the high society of New York City that the family had always wanted to consolidate. A look from her could extinguish any slip-up, and Richard knew that if his interest in Emily were discovered, the reaction would be swift and cold. Mariana was the mistress of the house, and her certainties left no room for doubts or distractions. Even so, Emily's humility and humanity disarmed the cynical millionaire, awakening in him a curiosity that he had long thought dormant. He sat on the balcony of his apartment in Brooklyn as night draped New York City like a starry cloak. Below, the city lights twinkled, a terrestrial constellation filled with intersecting stories. Among them, hers and his. The gentle breeze caressed his skin, and the whiskey slid warm down his throat, mixing with the chill he felt inside. The phone rang, interrupting that moment of reflection. It was Mariana. Her voice sounded firm, dry, yet with a subtlety that commanded without raising her voice. "Richard, tomorrow is the presentation of the new dish at Miller's Gourmet. I want you there impeccable. Be ready for the event. I have no doubt you will succeed." He agreed despite the conflict burning inside him. Mariana didn't know about Emily, couldn't know, and he intended to keep everything under control. The next day, the sophisticated silence of the restaurant dressed the atmosphere in exclusivity. Emily let her firm, quick steps echo through the dining room, hiding the invisible weight trapped in her soul. The clinking of cutlery and the woody aroma of wine mingled with the elegant murmur of conversations, a reality so close yet still so distant. Among the patrons, suspicious glances and whispered comments traversed the space. For some, Emily was merely the help, the balcony of social inequality that powerful New York City hid behind its gleaming facades. During a brief intermission, her phone vibrated discreetly. The message from her mother brought the world crashing down. Her deteriorating condition in the public hospital, the lack of resources, her fragile health, and the despair that accompanied her. Her hands trembled, her dry mouth betraying the fear, uncertainty and anguish of not being able to provide the bare minimum. Richard's eyes crossed her face at that moment, and surprisingly, his concern manifested without filter or artifice. "Is everything okay?" Emily hesitated, her voice nearly faltering, before unloading what she had been carrying for weeks. "My mother is very ill. The hospital is inadequate, and my salary doesn't even cover the medications." The silence tightened the atmosphere, as if the world had forgotten to breathe for a moment. Then, in an unexpected move for someone used to giving orders and controlling everything, Richard extended a card with discreet letters, the promise of a new offer. "I need someone to represent Miller's Gourmet at events and gatherings. The job is well paid, and more than that, there will be direct help for your mother's situation." Emily lifted her eyes, a mix of disbelief, fear, and a faint hope shining in that corner of her fatigued gaze. "I need to think," she replied, her voice choked, trying to tame her pride and apprehension. Richard nodded, bringing sincerity to his gesture. "This won't be an obstacle for you, Emily. I want you to know that." It was there, in that moment, that an unexpected alliance was born. Two worlds that had until then observed each other from a distance, and with distrust began to touch, trembling and tense, between absolute power and the struggle for dignified survival. As the city slowly fell asleep, a new story began to be woven. A story where the delicate line between social control and personal emancipation would be put to the test, where love and courage would shake the foundations of what was thought to be immutable. And for Emily, who carried hope in her calloused hands, life awakened to a new chapter, filled with challenges but also brimming with opportunities never before imagined. Tell us in the comments from which city you are watching and rate this story from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very valuable. Leave your like and subscribe to the channel to receive more exciting stories like this one. The sun was still peeking behind the buildings when Emily adjusted her uniform, connected to the ordinary face of the morning. The boarding house where she lived exuded a mix of sounds and smells, the whispering of conversations in the neighboring rooms, the pungent smell of burnt coffee, and the mold that clung to the walls. In the cracked mirror, her eyes revealed sleepless nights and accumulated fatigue, but there was no surrender there. There was a thin thread of hope and determination, an energy she carried along with her faded uniform. The opportunity offered by Richard Miller created an intense tension in Emily's heart. It was a chance to change her life and save her mother, who was withering in that inadequate public hospital, but it was also a leap into the dark, into a world that treated her as an intruder. The streets of Queens, with their pastel stalls and the strong smell of coffee, seemed like a parallel universe to the cold shine of the glass building of Miller's Gourmet, where she was to present herself. When she stepped into that imposing lobby, the contrast became almost painful. Her footsteps echoed on polished marble, and her breath seemed suspended in an environment that cultivated exclusivity and secrets. The receptionist discreetly observed her, the calculating gaze piercing through the expectation and invisible pride she held tightly to avoid slipping into insecurity. Led into a spacious room with floor-to-ceiling windows and fine furnishings, Emily faced Richard, who awaited her with a serious expression and that aura of power that seemed to permeate the air. Around them, men and women dressed in suits and expensive dresses exchanged rehearsed smiles and raised eyebrows in her direction. "Thank you for agreeing to come," Richard said, his voice firm but lacking the usual distance. "We need you to represent Miller's Gourmet at various events. It will be more than just a job. It will be about showing the world a different side of our brand." Emily felt the weight of those words and the whirlwind that surrounded them. Becoming the face of a culinary empire meant dealing with etiquette, appearances, formal speeches, everything she was expected to abandon. It was asking her to renounce central pieces of her identity, her mannerisms, her slang, even her accent. After the meeting, in a quiet hallway, Richard approached, and lowered his voice. "I know it's difficult," he confessed, "but I don't want you to think of this as a favor. I want you to know that you will have my support, not just professionally, but personally." Those words, simple and sincere, struck Emily in a way she couldn't explain. The feeling was a mix of relief and fear, hope and apprehension. In the following days, she plunged into an almost overwhelming learning experience: public speaking classes, posture training, exercises to control anxiety and shyness, avid reading of books on etiquette and social relationships. Each advance felt like a small triumph, but also a new scar, a renunciation of the past to fit into the new rules. On lonely nights in her modest boarding house, she felt her heart tighten for her sick mother and the values left behind. She cried softly amidst memories of simple smiles and the harshness of an uncertain future. Richard, on his part, witnessed separations happening in his own world. Mariana, his wife, seemed increasingly distant, rigid in social conventions, and insensitive to the transformation he was beginning to feel. The weight of family and business expectations haunted him with every step, while the image of Emily invaded his thoughts. When the day of the first major event for Miller's Gourmet arrived, with Emily officially as the guest face, the nervousness became almost palpable. The chosen dress was elegant yet understated, the delicate perfume masking the bitter scent of difficult days. The elevator ascended slowly, and the silence of the ride felt like a prelude to what was to come. In the hall, filled with people, lights and flashes, Emily felt the gazes of those judging her and her own ghosts fighting to not overwhelm her. But when she spotted Richard across the room, his eyes conveyed a silent invitation. She wouldn't face that night alone. There, amidst the formalities and masks, a story was born that would transcend social barriers and speak of courage, vulnerability, and the quest for a love that challenged not only fate, but conventions themselves. And so, under the ephemeral glow of the spotlights, a new chapter opened for Emily and Richard, filled with promises and fears, the first step of a journey that would change their lives forever. Tell us in the comments from which city you are watching and rate this story from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very valuable. Leave a like and subscribe to the channel to receive more exciting stories like this. The morning dawned grey, a fine drizzle moistening the trees of Central Park and Emily's restless soul. The previous night's event left deeper marks than she had anticipated. The lights, the gazes, the rehearsed smiles, all formed a mosaic of challenges that confronted her with herself daily. Early on, her phone vibrated with an unexpected message. It was a direct invitation from Richard. "I need to talk. Meeting at the office at 10 a.m. The tone was sober, laden with a veiled urgency. Emily swallowed hard, her heart racing. What does he need? Did something go wrong? Questions tangled in her mind. On her way to Midtown, Emily felt the contrast between her world and that universe of glass and steel. The bustling streets, the powerful cars, the mixed scent of asphalt and espresso created an atmosphere far removed from her routine in the outskirts. When she crossed the lobby of Miller's Gourmet, the receptionist looked at her with discreet surprise. The young woman becoming a constant presence there was still a novelty for many. Richard welcomed her in the boardroom, where glass panels showcased the pulsating city, while the fine drizzle stained the horizon. He sat behind the immense mahogany desk, his face serious, hands clasped under his chin. The weight of decisions was palpable. "Emily," he began, his voice deeper and tenser than on previous occasions, "I need you to know something before we agree to anything definitive. I found out that your mother has been hospitalized with more serious complications than we imagined. If I had delayed acting, the situation could have worsened." The shock made the ground disappear for a moment. Her fingers trembled, her mind spinning aimlessly. For a few seconds, only the sound of rain on the window filled the silence. "I didn't know," she murmured, her voice almost a whisper laden with pain and guilt. Richard stood up and approached, his posture still rigid, but the intensity soft, like an invitation or a plea. "I want us to expand the agreement. We won't just talk about events and formal representation anymore. I thought of something personal. I want you to come live in one of the houses owned by our company. It's not just an investment. It's a way to ensure that you and your mother—" Emily wanted to have a good quality of life. With that, she could better dedicate herself to work and take care of it with more peace of mind. Emily felt the overwhelming weight of an offer that went beyond the professional and entered the personal, invasive and bright at the same time. Opposing forces dueled within her, gratitude mixed with fear of vulnerability, pride fighting against need, the desire for a new life, and the fear of what she would leave behind. "Richard, I don't know what to say. This is much bigger than I expected." He smiled with a hint of sadness. "I don't want you to accept out of obligation, Emily. I want you to see this as an open path for you." Days later, in her modest apartment, sitting in the old wooden chair, Emily tried to organize her thoughts while the phone rang insistently. It was her mother, with a weak voice, asking to hold her hand, to feel that she wasn't alone in this battle. Gradually, reality was adjusting to new formats, pains and challenges. The move to the company's apartment was a leap into uncertainty, but also a breath of hope. Emily spent the night reviewing words and gestures, absorbing lessons to enhance her social role, and at the same time trying not to lose touch with the essence that kept her whole. As time went on, Richard observed profound changes not only in her, but also in himself. The woman who had learned to master her gaze, voice and body at public events challenged him to break down internal walls he hadn't even known he had. Moments of near silence and long pauses in their conversations showed that this was not a simple business relationship. However, complexity emerged strongly in the shadows of the social life they maintained. Sarah, his wife, watched with growing suspicion and resentment the closeness that was developing between Richard and Emily. At formal dinners, her cutting voice and icy glances planted unease in the subtext. One particularly tense night, after a tiring meeting, Sarah confronted Richard in the lobby of their apartment. "You're drifting away from me," she said, trembling between tears and contained anger. "And she's there, invading your world, your life, your marriage." Richard remained silent, staring at the wall beside him, feeling the weight of choices that were beginning to define not only his future but the fate of everyone involved. Amidst this turmoil, Emily discovered in her own heart an unexpected mix of admiration and awe for the man who challenged both her reality and her limits. Her courage multiplied, not only for her mother, but for the uncertain future that lay ahead, full of possibilities and danger. Tell us in the comments which city you're watching from and rate this story from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very valuable. Leave your like and subscribe to the channel to receive more exciting stories like this. The silent apartment seemed suspended in time that morning when Emily woke up with the bitter taste of doubt lodged in her throat. It had been a restless night, with dreams interspersed between her mother's urgent voice on the phone and Richard's distant gaze in the last meetings. Everything indicated that the chosen path, although full of promises, would not be short or easy. As she arranged her dark hair into a simple bun, the distant noise of the city seeped through the windows, covered by a fine and persistent mist. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee in the kitchen clashed with the olfactory sensation of accumulated anxiety that pulsed like a restless drum in her chest. Sarah carefully draped her blouse over her shoulders, remnants of the universe that was now expected of her, elegant, controlled, appropriate, yet still challenging in its authentic essence. The doorbell echoed and her heart raced, anticipating encounters that varied between the expected and the unexpected. It was Kate, her childhood friend, a comforting sight in the fragmented routine. "Now, I couldn't stand being stuck in my head anymore. "I had to come see you," she said, offering a warm smile and a bag that exuded the sweet, buttery aroma of the best pastries from the market. Emily felt the warmth of true friendship, an anchor amidst the turbulence. For a few moments, she set aside the tensions that had accompanied her since accepting Richard's invitation, embracing the comfort of the roots she firmly held onto from her past. But soon enough, she would have to return to the reality of commitments and expectations. The invitation to the annual charity gala of Miller's Gourmet was at the heart of it all. Not just an event, a showcase where norms and appearances danced side by side, where alliances formed and crumbled in glances and whispers, where Emily was not just a character, but a walking symbol of a world she needed to understand and shape. As she crossed the red carpet of the hall, under the incandescent glow of the majestic chandeliers, her burgundy dress shimmered in the light, her perfume mingling notes of vanilla and jasmine with the heavy air of veiled ambitions. With each step, she felt the gazes split between curiosity, skepticism, and that treacherous hint of judgment. Richard was by her side, his imposing presence balancing the unease she tried to disguise. However, between them lingered a distance hard to ignore, gazes that sought to meet but hesitated, unspoken words that resonated more powerfully in the shared silence. The arrival of Sarah transformed the atmosphere into a stage of suffocating tensions. Wearing a sober black dress, her eyes reflected the flame of possessiveness and resistance. Her steps cut through the hall with calculated firmness, cold as knives sliding beneath the skin of all who sensed her presence. The gazes froze in Emily's direction, the perceived intruder, the bridge to an impending domestic crisis. In the hallway of the building, when the voices had calmed and the echoes of the party dissipated, Emily summoned her courage. From the depths of her heart, Emily confronted Richard. "I need to know what we are." Her voice trembled, but remained firm. "What this means to you." He diverted his words for a moment, his watery gaze avoiding direct confrontation. "I don't know if we have simple answers," he sighed, "but I know you've changed everything inside me, and that scares me more than I'd like to admit." That moment of vulnerability delicately broke the fortress surrounding them both, allowing emotions to flow despite the evident confusion. In the days that followed, Emily's routine became a constant dance between opposing forces. Accepting the elite world, she was still learning to navigate and preserving the authenticity that defined who she was. The attempts to reconcile expensive clothes with her down-to-earth nature, strict rules with carefree smiles, all while her heart raced in front of the man who dominated her destiny and thoughts. Richard felt trapped between the tradition that had shaped him and the newfound desire to build something real with Emily, something that made sense for both of them, despite the intrigues and social barriers that loomed. On a rainy afternoon, as the sky poured thick rhythmic drops against the office window, a harsh phone call interrupted their sacred hour. The voice of the doctor caring for Emily's mother reported an urgent complication requiring immediate surgical intervention. Time seemed to conspire against them. Each second imposed a growing weight. Emily felt anxiety knotting in her chest. Richard held her hand firmly yet gently, a gesture that spoke more than words ever could. In that silent embrace between windows reflecting the grey, wet city, a pact was sealed. Not just a business agreement, but a profound human connection. An alliance forged from fear, hope, and the unyielding persistence to keep fighting. However, external shadows continued to advance. Social pressures, prying eyes, the risk of deceit and betrayal became increasingly present, demanding courage beyond what they had imagined, unimaginable sacrifices and truths they might not yet be ready to face. Let us know in the comments which city you are watching from and rate this story from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very valuable. Leave a like and subscribe to the channel to receive more exciting stories like this. The New York night fell shrouded in a fine mist, the yellowed lights of the city reflecting on the rain-soaked sidewalks. Inside Emily's apartment, the silence felt heavier than ever. She sat on the couch, her face illuminated only by the phone screen and the dim light of the lamp, as her thoughts swirled in a whirlwind of doubts and fears. In recent days, Emily's life had transformed into a delicate dance between two conflicting realities. On one side was the elite world, refined and relentless, where every gesture and word were meticulously measured, and where she was still trying to find her place, her step in the complex social choreography. On the other was the simple, genuine essence she carried within, her down-to-earth nature, the easy laughter that didn't fade even in the face of the harshest gazes, the worn clothes she kept like medals of her history. Reconciling them was no simple task. There was, above all, her heart, which raced out of sync and quickened every time Richard was near, a man who dominated her destiny and her most secret thoughts. Richard, for his part, felt like a divided man, trapped between the tradition that had shaped his life and the unprecedented feeling of wanting to build something real with Emily, something that made sense for both of them, amidst the intrigues and social barriers that rose with each step. He carried a silent burden, the pressure from family and the corporate world, while trying to make room for the unexpected feelings growing in his chest. On a rainy afternoon, as the sky poured thick, rhythmic drops against the massive window of the office, a phone call changed the course of the day. The voice of the doctor responsible for Emily's mother's care entered clear and urgent into the silence of the room. "Dr. Emily, unfortunately the situation has worsened. The surgery needs to be done urgently. There is no more time to wait." The pressure in her chest increased, as if a knot tightened around her breath. The clock ticked quickly, mercilessly, each second weighing like a brick. Richard, noticing her visible anguish, held her hand firmly yet gently, a touch that communicated everything words could not carry. In that brief, silent embrace, before the grey, rainy city that blurred the horizon, more than a business agreement was sealed. It was a deep human alliance, marked by fear, hope, and the unyielding strength to keep fighting despite the adversities. But the external shadows showed no mercy. The weight of social differentiation, judgmental gazes, the constant fear of deceit and betrayal became inseparable companions in Emily and Richard's relationship. It was a test of courage that demanded a strength they weren't sure they possessed, difficult sacrifices, decisions with real consequences, and the confrontation with truths that were still waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. In the following weeks, the routine of careful meetings and secrets left neither of them able to breathe easy. Emily maintained her firmly constructed smile, though inside, anxiety gnawed at her tranquility, while Richard tried to balance family demands, business obligations, and that improbable feeling that insisted on filling his thoughts. Amidst it all, Sarah, the betrayed and resentful wife, did her part to reignite the storm. Her icy glares and sharp words carried more than jealousy. They were weapons in a battle to preserve what she still considered her right, her stability, her version of the truth. One of those tense nights in the luxurious apartment they shared, Sarah confronted Richard. "The moment when nerves were frayed. You're cheating on me." Her words escaped between tears and contained anger. "And you want this to continue as if nothing is happening? What kind of farce is this, Richard?" He, a man who had always known how to control his demons, was left speechless. The silence spoke louder and heavier than any response could. There was a growing chasm between the couple, a distance that no apparent normalcy could bridge. Meanwhile, Emily fought against her own ghosts from the past. The fear of not being enough, of succumbing to differences, of not being able to survive in this relentless universe. However, each obstacle overcome, each achievement in her emotional independence, built a silent fortress in her heart, made of courage and genuine love, even when everything seemed to conspire against her. And so, amidst secret meetings, shared secrets, and inexorable confrontations, the clock of life continued its course. Everything pointed to the inevitable moment when the lies would be exposed, the feelings unveiled, and the future they chose would be irreversible. Tell us in the comments which city you're watching from, and rate this story from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very valuable. Leave a like and subscribe to the channel to receive more exciting stories like this. The early morning hung over New York City with that heavy silence that only late hours can bring. When the city finally tires and the lights fade into the distance, exposing the secrets that the day insists on hiding. In Emily's apartment, this silence felt like a brief breath before the storm. She sat by the window, watching the lights of the avenue slowly flicker on, each bright point a mark of the world that had become so distant from her original simplicity. The damp air from the rain still permeated the walls, and a subtle scent of cold coffee mingled with the delicate aroma of the woody perfume that Richard had left lingering on the armchair beside her. She closed her eyes for a moment, seeking internal balance in a sea of conflicting emotions, trying to protect a fragile truth that threatened to shatter everything. For weeks, the growing tension between Richard, Emily, and Sarah had turned their days into a minefield. The secret meetings were becoming less furtive, and the glances from others more accusatory. The whispers in the company hallways, the veiled messages in family meetings, and the hidden text exchanges on phones were clear signs that this serious game was far from just a clandestine romance. Richard, for his part, wore the mask of absolute control, but his eyes betrayed a constant internal battle. The weight of his surname, responsibilities, and his own desires made each decision a choice between who he was and who he wanted to be. The pressure to maintain appearances weighed like a wall, leaving him restless, almost a stranger in his own world. And in that tangle of emotions, Emily discovered a strength she didn't know she possessed. The doubts about her origins, the insecurities that had haunted her since childhood, gave way to a silent courage. She knew she would be the target of criticism, intrigue, and even betrayals, disguised as advice. Still, the love that grew in her chest challenged fear, nurturing an almost stubborn hope. On a night when the rain pounded against the windows, as if trying to wash the city of its anguish, an unexpected phone call broke the tense routine. The voice on the other end was firm, yet carried that tone only people accustomed to difficult decisions can maintain. "Emily, we need to talk in person." It was Richard, urgency veiled in the subtext. Without hesitation, she agreed. They met at a small, discreet cafe in Brooklyn, away from the spotlight and false sympathies of the elite. The aroma of fresh coffee and the distant murmur of conversations were a stark contrast to the emotional weight that hung between them. He began, unable to hide the tears that threatened to escape. "I don't know what else I can do to protect you." "And myself," he confessed in a low voice, choked with emotion. Emily felt her chest tighten, but she remained resolute. "Maybe we shouldn't hide who we are anymore," she suggested, seeing the hesitation in his eyes. Richard raised his hands as if trying to ward off all the ghosts surrounding them. "I've thought about that, but the cost may be greater than we imagine. My family could turn against me, my partners might doubt my abilities. We're in the middle of a storm, and I can't guarantee we'll come out unscathed." She reached for his hand, intertwining her fingers with his. "I don't want you to come out unscathed. I want us to fight together, even if we fall in the process. Because falling is part of living." It was the first time she confessed that simple, raw truth, more powerful than any agreement or strategy. They remained like that, hands joined, lingering gazes, the sound of coffee around them fading into the background, while the city breathed its own secrets and hopes. Outside the establishment, however, shadows moved. Sarah, using her own influence, began to architect an alliance capable of turning the tide. Her cold and calculated actions gained momentum, fueled by resentment and the fear of losing everything she believed was hers. Each step she planned was a silent storm threatening to descend upon Richard and Emily, testing the authenticity of the relationship that grew in the face of adversity. The tension reached almost unbearable levels, and the line between love and conflict began to blur too much to ignore. More than ever, they needed to choose, to continue hiding in the shadows or to face the world at the risk of losing or gaining everything that mattered. The clock inexorably moved toward the moment when the hidden truths would emerge and upend everyone's lives. Tell us in the comments. What city are you watching from? Please rate this story from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very valuable. Like this video and subscribe to the channel for more exciting stories like this one. The sun had not yet shown its face when Emily woke up, surrounded by that dense silence that precedes great storms. The city seemed to be asleep, but within it a restlessness simmered. The words spoken the night before echoed in her mind like a persistent drum. Falling is part of living. That simple truth, devoid of any artifice, now guided her, even though the path ahead was shrouded in fog and fear. The apartment was cold, even as the morning began to warm up, and the faint light of dawn cast long shadows across the wooden floor. She got up slowly, her heart racing, a mix of anxiety and determination. The decision she would make that day could change everything. She called Richard, the nagging doubt that had been driving her for days. His voice, still hoarse from sleep, carried a mix of surprise and urgency. "Emily, are you ready to face what's coming?" "Not entirely," she confessed, biting her lower lip, "but I'm tired of running from the consequences." Amidst this turmoil, Sarah was already moving her pieces with determination. That silent game, made of whispers in hallways, discreet meetings, and unexpected alliances, reeked of a mix of revenge and desperation. For her, every moment that the truth remained hidden was an open wound, bleeding her lost dignity. At the headquarters of Almeida and NATO, the atmosphere was tense, palpable in the air, like a storm about to break. In meetings where the tone cut through the air like a knife, Richard faced direct pressure from the more conservative partners, who were beginning to question his leadership, shaken by the rumors swirling around. His tired yet firm gaze met Emily's through the glass window of the office. She responded with a discreet nod, her face carefully hiding the tears that threatened to escape. "We're entering territory where there's no room for mistakes," Richard murmured, his voice low, to himself and to her. But the choice had already been made. That day, in haste, they organized a press conference, an unprecedented act of courage within that elite that valued unyielding appearances. Richard publicly announced his definitive separation from Sarah and in a subtle yet clear manner denied the rumors without exposing his relationship with Emily, protecting her with a gaze full of promise and care. At the same conference, however, Sarah did not remain idle. In response to the news, she launched a veiled offensive, spreading compromising details through social and economic channels, trying to tarnish the image of her ex-husband and dismantle the woman who had become her symbol of betrayal. Social media buzzed with conflicting opinions, while Emily felt the ground shake beneath her feet. Amidst the media storm, Emily's strength came not only from the love she shared with Richard, but also from the network of loyalties she began to build around her. Old friends, colleagues, even an unexpected ally from the press who saw in their story more than a scandal. A portrait of the struggle between social classes, prejudices, and the genuine desire for freedom. On a particularly difficult night, at the end of a day filled with piercing glances and whispered gossip, Emily received a short message from Richard. "Come home. We need to be strong. Together." In the small apartment that they would now share, the silence was broken only by the sound of rain pounding against the windows. Richard embraced her with the intensity of someone who knows that tomorrow may not promise calmness, but offers a chance to start anew. "The world may try to bring us down," he whispered close to her ear, "but they won't be able to erase who we are." Emily let the tears flow silently, feeling that finally, even amidst the storm, she had found a safe harbor. The future was still uncertain, filled with clashes and revelations, but for the first time they did not have to fear the truths that were to come because they were ready to face them side by side. Let us know in the comments which city you are watching from and rate this story from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very valuable. Like this video and subscribe to the channel for more exciting stories like this one. The next morning arrived with an overcast sky and a humid air that seemed to weigh down on New York City, reflecting the tense atmosphere that had settled in the hearts of Emily and Richard. The distant sound of honking horns and the unmistakable smell of fresh bread from the bakeries awakened in the city a routine that for them took on the contours of a daily battle. In the small, simply decorated apartment, she struggled to find strength, still feeling the weight of the veiled criticisms circulating through the streets and online. The phone vibrated on the kitchen table, and a message from Richard appeared on the screen. "Meeting this afternoon. We need to devise a strategy to contain this crisis. I'm counting on you." Emily swallowed hard. She knew this was just the beginning, the usual social storm in the battles behind the scenes, but now also permeated by a personal component that had wounded her pride and shaken her certainties. Upon arriving at the elegant Almeida and Neto office, the intense smell of coffee and soft music came from the break room, but the atmosphere was heavy. In the marble corridors, whispers mingled with hurried footsteps and suspicious glances. Richard, impeccably dressed in a suit and with a solemn expression, greeted her with a silent nod, conveying an urgency without words. In the meeting room, lit projectors displayed screens filled with graphs and sensational headlines that were swirling through social media like turbulent waves. On either side of the table, the partners debated the best way to preserve the brand's reputation, raising hypotheses in hushed voices, tense, blending strategy and cold pragmatism. "The exposure is inevitable," one of them said, nervously adjusting his glasses. "What we can control is the narrative. The public needs to see credibility and transparency without leaving room for these rumors to destroy everything we've built." Richard nodded, aware of the challenge. Emily remained firm, her gaze trying to convey confidence, but inside she was battling the anxiety that clawed at her throat. "We need to be honest, but also protect our privacy," he asserted, his voice steady. "We cannot feed the haters, but we also cannot hide. Public opinion is divided, and we need to reclaim the truth." It was then that Emily spoke up, her voice sounding clear, carrying a mix of courage and frankness. "The truth is that our private and professional lives intertwine more than we would like, but they should not be weapons to destroy people. If we are here, it's because we believe in what we do and in what we feel," she said, looking directly at Richard, as if to say, "We are in this together." The declaration brought about a collective silence. The partners exchanged glances, some apprehensive, others reflecting on this new, more human and vulnerable stance. In the following days, a series of actions were implemented. Official statements, controlled interviews, positive reinforcement on social media, with sincere testimonials from employees and partners highlighting Richard's professional and ethical side, as well as Emily's integrity as a person and as a woman. At the same time, Sarah's aggressive campaign intensified. She used her contacts to undermine the image they were trying to rebuild, spreading distorted versions, selective leaks, and even investing in veiled attacks on Emily's social media, who spent hours deleting malicious comments and responding with calm but firmness. Despite the conflicting scenario, an unexpected ally emerged. A renowned investigative journalist, known for the impartiality and depth of his articles, became interested in the broader story behind the scandal. He saw it as a reflection of the social complexity of America, the barriers between classes, the disguised prejudice, the role of the media in shaping narratives, and above all, the struggle of two people to remain true to themselves even when the world seemed to conspire against them. In a coffee conversation that turned lengthy, they shared their ideas about truth, justice, and love as the New York morning gained light and movement outside. The journalist promised a series of reports that would showcase the duality of the case, without sensationalism, but with empathy. Amid all this turmoil, Richard and Emily leaned on each other more and more. The nights were marked by deep conversations and also precious moments of relaxation when laughter escaped, even in adversity. The shared intimacy grew stronger, not only through love, but through complicity in daily struggles. On one of those nights, after the city lights outside had dimmed, Richard held her hand and said, "No matter what they say, what the world wants us to be, as long as we are together, that's already a revolution." Emily smiled, feeling that even amidst so many storms, she had found someone to face any gale. The road ahead was still filled with obstacles, but the certainty that they would fight side by side brought an indescribable comfort. Now tell us in the comments which city you are watching from and rate this story from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very valuable. Leave a like and subscribe to the channel to receive more exciting stories like this one. The week dawned grey in New York City, a persistent fog covering the buildings, as a light drizzle transformed the city into a stage for silent dramas. In the office of Almeida and Miller, the tension was palpable. Richard entered the conference room with determined steps, but his face revealed the fatigue accumulated from sleepless nights. The oval mahogany table reflected the white lights from the ceiling. While the partners settled in, some nervously fiddling with their tablets, others exchanging anxious glances. "We need to face the facts head-on," Richard opened, his voice firm in the silence that formed. "Sarah's campaign has gained momentum, and this is affecting not only the company's image, but also our investors and partners." One director stroked his beard and continued, "Foreign investors want guarantees. If this crisis continues, we will lose essential capital for upcoming projects." Richard moved closer to the projector screen, where graphs showing stock fluctuations and sensational headlines from online newspapers appeared. "We cannot act on impulse, nor can we bow our heads to dirty tactics. I propose hiring a crisis communication consultancy so we can respond as transparently as possible," he stated, casting a confident look at everyone. Emily, sitting beside him, felt the weight of that responsibility, but regardless of the exhausting hours, her voice, though a bit timid, reflected her dedication. "I also believe we should show society what we really do," she said with conviction. "Present the social projects we support, our capacity to act for the common good. It's not just a matter of image, it's who we are." The partners exchanged glances, some nodding, others still hesitant. The proposal would open space for leaders and critics to see a less explored facet of the company. In the following days, Almeida and Miller launched a series of social initiatives to ease tensions. Donations to schools in underprivileged areas, mentorship programs for at-risk youth, and cultural events in traditional neighborhoods. The press began to notice a change, and the reports, even against the difficult tide, brought stories of people impacted by these projects. Social media also showed positive signs, with supporters reinforcing Richard and Emily's image as dedicated individuals, distancing themselves from the gossip that had previously dominated discussions. But Sarah did not give up. In her mansion in the upscale area, surrounded by luxurious furniture and large windows showcasing the New York skyline, she prepared her next moves, even though loneliness, A ghost, as present as the fear of losing control, lingered, maintaining its connections, distributing versions and insinuations, inflaming feelings and stirring passions and rivalries within the business and social circles. On one of those afternoons, she received a visit from Lisa, an old friend who now showed signs of concern. "Emily, have you thought that this war isn't winning anyone?" she asked, carefully sitting on the velvet sofa. Emily sighed, her trembling fingers fiddling with her dark nail polish. "And what should I do? Should I throw in the towel? That's never been my style, but I confess that the weariness has been greater than I expected." Lisa looked into her friend's eyes with sincerity. "Maybe it's time to rethink things before something irreparable happens. Sometimes, admitting that we need to change is the first step towards something better." Meanwhile, in another chapter of this story, Richard and Emily found refuge and strength in their daily lives. In the simple ritual of their mornings together, with the smell of fresh coffee and warm bread from the bakery on the corner, there was space to laugh, discuss ideas, and plan for the future. The nighttime conversations, once marked by uncertainties, now became confessions of dreams and plans that ran counter to the chaos. During a walk through Central Park under a sky beginning to clear, the aroma of wet earth and the gentle sound of rustling leaves created the perfect atmosphere for a moment of honesty. "I'm still afraid of what might come," he admitted, squeezing her hand tenderly. "Fear is normal," Emily replied, smiling with a mix of comfort and determination. "But we are so much bigger than fear. We have our history, our encounters, everything we've built even amidst the storm." Richard leaned in to kiss her forehead, and in that simple gesture was all the meaning of a silent revolution, not of grand public acts, but of the courage to stand by each other, overcoming the barriers imposed by the world and prejudices. The path ahead remained uncertain, with stones and traps, but their shared certainty served as a guide. They were willing to fight, to rebuild, to transform pain into hope. And there, under the New York sky, rehearsing a truce from the rain, they found the strength to move forward. Let us know in the comments which city you are watching from and rate this story from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very valuable. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more exciting tales like this. The next morning dawned with a fragile brightness, as if the sky was hesitant between rain and sun, reflecting the faint hope that was beginning to bloom in the hearts of Emily and Richard. In that small apartment they now called home, the warm aroma of fresh coffee mingled with the sweet scent of warm bread coming from the kitchen as they shared a simple routine, but one filled with profound meanings. Each gesture seemed to reclaim the humanity lost to the news and opinions coming from outside, like a fortress built slowly in silence. Richard absent-mindedly flipped through a yellowed newspaper, the headlines with few positive highlights, contrasting with the timid glow of his expression when his eyes met hers across the table. "I think we are making it, even if slowly," he said, his voice carrying a certainty that surprised them both. Emily smiled, the warmth of that moment filling the space between them. The truth has a way of revealing itself, proving itself. When we least expect it, it finds its way, she replied, brushing rebellious strands of hair from her face. But the struggle was still far from over. In the corridors of power and influence, silent movements advanced. Sarah had not given up. On the contrary, she seemed more determined, fueled by bitterness and the need to reclaim what she considered lost. Her cold gaze swept over the pieces of this social chess game in which she found herself involved, determined to move her forces with cunning. In a private meeting with old allies, they plotted strategies to destabilize Richard. Legal actions, selective leaks, and even veiled threats were being devised as weapons to maintain control over that unequal game. Meanwhile, Emily felt the impact of that invisible war on her skin, as if each word pierced like a hidden knife. Even so, she sought strength in what still burned within her, the hope and love that grew with each moment alongside Richard. One night, late, When the city lay in absolute silence under the yellowed lights flickering along the streets, Emily received a surprising call. On the other end of the line was the investigative journalist who supported their cause with news. "I've gained access to documents that clearly show the manipulation behind the campaign against you," said the firm, yet excited voice. "This story will turn into a series of reports that will open many eyes." Emily felt a mix of relief and apprehension, knowing that with the support of the press that truly wanted to tell the truth, she could turn a page in the complicated book they were living. In the days that followed, as the reports began to be published, showing the facts candidly and giving voice to the victims of prejudice and social divisions, Richard and Emily found themselves increasingly immersed in this phenomenon of public recognition. The pressure eased, and the truth gained ground amidst the dust of lies. Still, moments of fragility were not lacking. Sitting in the living room, amidst tight hugs and contained tears, they confessed their fears, doubts, and the wounds opened by the battle. "Do you think it will be easy to go back after all this?" Emily asked one night, her voice trembling. Richard held her face in his hands, his firm touch conveying security. "No, it won't be, but it's worth every effort because I don't want to lose what we've built," he replied, looking into her eyes as if his life depended on those words. Weeks turned into months, and what once seemed like a battlefield transformed into a landscape of growth and discovery. Old friends began to reconnect, new bonds were formed, and even Sarah, amidst her own internal revolutions, seemed to start understanding that some battles aren't worth the price of destruction. During an unexpected meeting between Sarah and Emily, the words were harsh but filled with sincerity. There were scars, yes, but also the possibility of a new beginning, albeit with boundaries. Richard watched from a distance, understanding that more than a war between people, this story was about choices, forgiveness, and humanity. On a golden late afternoon, the three found themselves facing the urban horizon, each carrying their pains and lessons, but with the clear conviction that regardless of the paths chosen, the truth, in its own time, always finds its place. Let us know in the comments which city you're watching from and rate this story from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very valuable. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more real and exciting dramas like this. The sun began to hide behind the tall buildings of New York City, painting the sky in golden and pink hues that contrasted with the silent hustle still driving life in the metropolis. That late afternoon, the trio formed by Richard, Emily, and Sarah was about to experience a moment that would change the course of the story that had united them in a complex and unlikely way. The negotiations leading up to the meeting were filled with hesitations and caution. It was like walking on an emotional tightrope, where one misstep could unravel the fragile bridges built. But there was a mutual willingness, an urgent need to close a chapter that had consumed so much of their energy and commitments. Emily, wearing a nude knit top that contrasted with her sun-kissed skin illuminated by twilight, sat up straight, but her eyes revealed the internal battles still to be won. Sarah, in a simple black dress, kept crossing and uncrossing her fingers, a clear sign of the nervousness consuming her despite her impassive demeanor. Richard, dressed in an impeccable white shirt, spoke with the necessary firmness, but his tone carried the care that years of coexistence had taught him about the limits of diplomacy. "We're not here to relive mistakes or cast accusations," he began, fixing his gaze on both, "but to find a way to move forward, so that each of us can learn, reconcile, and perhaps rebuild what has been demolished." Sarah took a deep breath, the silence establishing a space for structured pronouncements. "I didn't come here to ask for forgiveness," she said, her voice firm yet vulnerable, "nor to deny the damage, but to acknowledge that I lost a lot in this battle. The truth hurts, and perhaps it was my own pain that fueled this war between us." Emily remained silent for a moment, letting the words of her former adversary cool in the air. "I was also very afraid," she confessed, her voice heavy with emotion. "Afraid of the unknown, afraid of being invisible, of not being enough. But I found in this struggle the strength to be who I really am and to value what we are together." The meeting continued, with each exposing their scars and dreams yet to be realized. The sincerity, sometimes harsh, served as both a balm and a ground for new possibilities, if only for the simple fact of closing chapters with dignity. Once the conversation ended, a comfortable silence took over the environment, broken only by the rustling leaves around the park where they met. It was as if the universe itself recognized that moment of change and allowed a truce in their internal turmoils. On that serene afternoon, Richard looked at the two women who had made his life more complex, yet infinitely richer. "I don't promise it will be easy," he said with a melancholic smile, "but I promise that as long as we are together, we will face everything." Hi, Emily and Sarah exchanged glances, not as enemies, but as people who, despite their differences, recognized the humanity in one another. In the days that followed, life took a less stormy course. Almeida and Nito solidified social actions that transcended corporate walls and reached the outskirts, seeking to bridge the gaps caused by centuries of inequality. The projects involving education were expanded, giving voice to young people who, once silenced, now dreamed of a future. Richard and Emily found beauty in the small moments of everyday life. A shared coffee, a laugh escaping amidst traffic, the silent company on a rainy night. The love they cultivated shared space with the responsibilities they had taken on, balancing tenderness and pragmatism. Sarah, for her part, began a process of personal transformation, realizing that true strength was not in battling against others, but in achieving inner peace. On a sunny Saturday, Emily visited a community school supported by the company's projects, where children and young people looked at her with admiration and hope. In that genuine contact, she felt the confirmation that her struggle was worth it, for herself, for Richard, for all those seeking a fairer tomorrow. As she walked back home, smelling the sweet aroma of coffee coming from a bakery, she realized that the true challenge now was to keep the flame alive, even when the world insisted on blowing contrary winds. And amidst victories and stumbles, tears and smiles, their story continued, a narrative of resilience, growth and possibility, anchored in a love that refuses to surrender. Let us know in the comments which city you're watching from and rate this story from 0 to 10. Your opinion. It is very valuable. Don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel to follow more real and inspiring stories like this one. Autumn was beginning to announce itself in New York City, with a cool, gentle breeze that brought the scent of dry leaves mixed with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee from the corner cafe. It was one of those days when the city, despite its hustle and bustle, seemed to offer pauses to take a deep breath and reflect on the paths taken. In the modest apartment where Richard and Emily shared their mornings, the yellowish sunlight streamed through the large windows, casting soft shadows on the wooden floor. Elisa, Emily's secretary, entered quietly with a tray of coffee, 2 steaming cups, accompanied by warm crab cakes. She wore her impeccable uniform, but displayed a serene, almost maternal smile that had become part of that intimate yet professional environment. "Good morning, Miss." "Emily," she greeted, placing the tray on the kitchen table. Emily looked at the young woman, recognizing not only a collaborator, but a thread connected to the greater purpose that drove her. A teenager from a disadvantaged neighborhood, Elisa had been one of the beneficiaries of the company's social projects, and her presence represented a silent victory. "Good morning, Elisa. Thank you," Emily replied with a warm smile. As they enjoyed their coffee, Richard walked in through the kitchen, his blazer casually draped over the arm of the sofa. He paused, noticing the scene, and smiled, feeling the strength of daily small victories. "Are you two conspiring without me?" he joked, pulling a chair closer. "Only what's important, crab cakes and hope," Emily replied, her eyes sparkling amidst the light laughter. Despite this cozy setting, challenges remained. That week, a company assembly would gather the top executives to define the direction for the following year. There were pending issues to resolve, resources to reallocate, and goals that needed to be reassessed after the turbulence faced. More than just numbers, it was a test of resilience for those who had invested time, energy, and reputation. In the glass-walled auditorium reflecting the blue sky, Richard took the lead in the presentation, his voice echoing with confidence, even though traces of fatigue lingered in the background. "We can no longer just wait for the market to recognize what we do. We need to intensify our social commitment, expand our projects, and engage the community even more," he argued, flipping through slides that showcased results and heartfelt testimonials. Emily added, "Transformation depends on us. Our company is not just an economic entity, but an agent of change. This must be the promise we carry forward, to our investors and to everyone who believed in our dream." The response was a mix of applause and thoughtful looks. Not everyone shared the idealism they championed, and many seemed to harbor a skepticism that was hard to break. At the end of the meeting, Richard and Emily walked down the hallway, their whispered conversation trying to ease the remaining tension. "I think we planted the seed," he said, "but there's still a lot of hard ground to plow." Emily took a deep breath, feeling the certainty of that path as something that would transcend obstacles. "Every step has its value," she affirmed, "and we will keep moving forward, together." Later, on their way home, they were surprised by an unexpected visitor. Sarah knocked on the door with an envelope in hand. The gesture, laden with meaning, expressed an attempt at rapprochement and perhaps some form of reparation. "Can I come in?" she asked, observing them with a look that mixed anxiety and hope. Richard exchanged a glance with Emily, who nodded affirmatively. Sarah entered, sitting down carefully. "I know I haven't erased everything that happened," she began, her voice measured, "but I brought a document that can contribute to the social projects." "I thought it was time to contribute in a concrete way." Emily received the paper with surprise, scanning the proposal for a partnership between the institutions Sarah now directed and Almeida and Miller in a joint initiative to expand the reach of the programs. "This is good news," Emily said, her eyes misty. "Perhaps it's the beginning of a new path for all of us." And within that illuminated apartment, the idea of reconstruction took on a definitive shape, no longer as a distant dream, but as a real possibility for transformation. That night, as the city quieted under the timid glow of the stars, Richard and Emily sat on the balcony, the comfortable silence filled only by the distant sound of traffic and the hooting of owls. "It's incredible how everything has changed," Emily murmured. "It almost seems hard to believe that just months ago we were on the verge of giving up." Richard wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close with tenderness. "Life is like that, full of twists and turns. We just need to learn to dance in the midst of them," he said, with a smile that warmed the heart. Emily rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the calm pulse of that connection, a safe place where any storm could be faced. And so, amidst challenging moments and unexpected achievements, their story continued, woven with threads of love, resilience, and the constant hope for better days. Tell us in the comments from which city you are watching and rate this story from 0 to 10. Your opinion is essential. Leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new story filled with emotion and overcoming. The dawn in New York City not only brought the awakening of the city, but also a silent renewal in the hearts of Emily and Richard. The streets began to come alive under the sky tinged in silver and pink hues, and the sweet aroma of fresh coffee filled the apartment with the strength of a promise fulfilled. On the balcony, where just hours before they had shared confidences under the stars, light now reigned. a clear sign of a new chapter about to be written. Richard appreciated the scene. Emily focused on her notes, her delicate hands holding the pen with the same firmness she faced the challenges that arose. Her gaze was intense, vibrant, marked by the determination he was learning to admire more each day. He felt the urge to say something that expressed everything he had bottled up inside, the fears, the contained joys, the gratitude for having her by his side. "Emily," he called softly, sitting beside her, "have you ever imagined how much has changed in such a short time?" She looked up, smiling with a mix of surprise and tenderness. "More than that, Richard. I think it's impossible to go back. We've transformed." Still in that tenuous tension, before taking steps forward, there was a silence that weighed heavily. They both knew that the real test was yet to come. After all, rebuilding bonds and managing a socially responsible empire was not a task for fragile souls. In the halls of Almeida and NATO, the atmosphere was different. There was enthusiasm, yes, but also shadows of the past, especially among some executives who still resisted the changes, the expansion of investments in social initiatives. Richard and Emily knew that, once again, they would be tested. "We will present the final plan to the board this week," Richard announced in a strategic meeting. His voice, firm and clear, left no room for doubt or weakness. "It's time to consolidate what we believe in." Emily, sitting beside him, observed the room filled with interested yet skeptical gazes. Each expression held a meaning, and reading between the lines had become part of her daily routine. At that moment, a young intern from the communications department approached, bringing a sealed envelope. Richard opened it and read the first lines. His eyes widened slightly, and he was filled with curiosity upon noticing the lighter tone of the note. "It's an invitation," he said, sharing the paper with Emily, "to participate in an international event on corporate social responsibility in London." Emily blinked, surprised and excited. This could expand our vision, open doors. It would be an important recognition. They both knew that the opportunity would bring visibility to their projects, but would also test the consistency and courage of the values they stood for. As they organized the trip, their personal lives intertwined with their dreams and challenges. On a cloudy morning, in a cozy cafe in Brooklyn, the conversation took on a more intimate tone. "Richard, sometimes I think about how much our story has gone through trials," Emily said, stirring her coffee as the bitter aroma wafted through the air. "But I also think about the people we've helped. Those bright eyes we encounter at school, in the community, are our reward." He smiled, gently touching her hand. "That's true. We stand firm not just for our love, but for everything it represents, for every life we touch." The phone call he received at that moment, however, insisted on breaking that serene moment. "Richard, it's the company. There's turbulence in the stock market. News of a global economic crisis that is starting to affect investors here and abroad." His eyes narrowed. The world they were building was at risk of being shaken. "We need to act quickly," he communicated, hanging up the phone. "But above all, we need to be together, Emily. The storm outside cannot extinguish what is true between us." In the following days, the pressure mounted. Emergency meetings were called, strategies were revised, and the fast pace threatened to suffocate the serenity they sought. However, even amidst the chaos, they exchanged knowing glances, gestures that continued to confirm they were an invincible team when bound by love. Amidst this turmoil, a surprising proposal emerged, a joint project with international organizations aligned with sustainability and social inclusion that could turn the crisis into an opportunity. Richard and Emily embraced the challenge, showing that adversity for them was fuel. At a quiet dinner with the city lights twinkling in the distance, Emily admitted in a low voice, "I know we don't know what the future holds, but I want us to walk together through any storm." Richard pulled her close, sealing that promise with a kiss that carried all the strength and hope they had left. The story they began under the grey skies of New York City continued, now with a steadier rhythm, buoyed by the certainty that love and courage create deep roots, capable of withstanding any contrary wind. Udid, tell us in the comments which city you're watching from and rate this story from 0 to 10. Your opinion is essential to us. Don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel to keep following exciting and transformative stories like this one.